Hey everyone, it's been a minute. Wizards of the Coast put out an announcement. In fact, they announced a lot of things. MSRP is going to come back. That's nice. But there's going to be a bunch of universes beyond. From what they showed on the panel, there's going to be 6 big tentpole releases that are booster draftable next year. 3 of them are going to be universes beyond. And they're going to be legal in all formats, including standard. That's not so good. Now, I've got some ideas rather than complaints. You know, if this was just going to be a complaint video, there's enough other people on the internet doing that. I would like to offer something actionable, something I've been working on for a while, in order to change the situation, change the direction that Magic is going in. We're going to change it one brick at a time. So the title of this thumbnail, I'm not trying to be extremist or alarmist. I'm not trying to say Magic is necessarily going to die, but whether it does or it doesn't, I plan on going a different direction with it. A direction that doesn't have to include Hasbro. So a while back, Spice 8 Rack put out a YouTube video. I'll put a link in the description below. And later on in the video, it's about 2 hours long, he mentions Baudelaire and the idea of giving gifts. That if we give gifts for free to each other, that it sidesteps capitalism. That basically all the tools of capitalism fall apart if you're willing to do something for free, if you're willing to give gifts. And that idea kind of stuck with me. And so what I've been doing, making this block for Veldmar, which if this is your first time tuning in, you can check out links in the description below. This is MTG Nexus we're looking at here. And I've got bunches of videos where I talk about my first 2 sets. This is like a glimpse of the 3rd set, which I'll leave a link in the description for that too. I've got about 3/4 of the card designs done. What I've got up on MTG Nexus represents not quite half of the set. But the block is going to get completed. So at this point, I can say Veldmar block will be a done deal. Each of them is 281 cards, each of them is fully draftable, and they will play well together being drafted as a block. In block constructed format. I know it's been a while since anyone's heard that term. So I'm trying to give you a gift, but I realized that I haven't made it that easy to receive it yet. Right? For the first step of the gift is, here are these expansions of Magic that were not made by Hasbro. Yeah, you can play them in all of the normal ways, but you have to print off the cards yourself and you have to find people to play with. And that means there's some hoops to jump through that the average person's not going to be ready to do. So I realized I needed to make this gift easier to receive. And that's what I'm working on today with this video. I am brainstorming and I'm sharing my ideas with you all about how Magic can continue without Hasbro. I'm not going to waste time talking about how Universes Beyond is bad for the game, how the pace of new releases is too fast, or power creep, etc. I don't want to complain in this video. I want to offer you things we can do. So, Veldmar block is nearly complete, and I was thinking that in addition to offering you the cards, right, this is something you could take and you could proxy it yourself, with a marker, or you could print them off with your printer, put them onto a Post-it note or a whatever inside of a sleeve in front of a basic land. Or you could go to a proxy website like I did. Wizards of the Coast doesn't care about you doing this as long as you're not buying them. As long as you are just using them for free, playing with your friends in a non-tournament setting, Wizards of the Coast has stated very plainly they don't care about playtest cards. That's what they call them. So we're going to work within that structure. So I'm thinking about trying to set up a tournament within the coming year. Yeah, sometime roughly a year from now. I don't know if I can do it that quickly because I am just one person. I have limited financial resources. I'm good at finding bargains and at finding really cheap ways of doing things. I have a big enough collection of Magic cards that I can provide some prizes for free. There will be no entry fees, right? Money is not changing hands for this. It won't be a sanctioned tournament. It will allow these proxy cards in the formats that I'm going to describe in a moment. And there would be prize support with no entry fee, no money changing hands, which makes it all legal. As long as you are not paying me for anything, as long as I am just giving you a gift, there is nothing that they can do to stop me. So, with that out of the way, the formats I'm thinking about here, I'm thinking about draft formats, obviously. I designed these to be roughly equivalent to play booster packs. The quick and dirty way that I make a play booster pack is I take 2 slots that are either a rare and or mythic card, 4 slots that are uncommon, 8 slots that are commons, and 1 slot that is either a basic land, in this case a waste, because wastes have some theme in the set and can matter, and there are some colorless cards that require colorless mana, or a basic tap duel. And that's how the booster pack is structured. So they're always going to have 2 rares in them. Which is my closest approximation that I can easily accomplish as a quick, easy heuristic compared to the way that they print a play booster pack. And for drafting, I think it would be fun to do, triple Wastes of Veldmar, triple Defense of Veldmar, triple Growth of Veldmar, and we could also draft it as a block. And the way that block drafts were happening right at the end before they got rid of blocks entirely was you take 1 pack of the most recent set of the block, 1 pack of the middle set of the block, and 1 pack of the oldest set of the block, and you draft them in that order, with the newest one first. And that way it meant that the draft format hadn't been the least solved by putting the newest set first and making it the most important one. They started doing it in that reverse order later in the process, and I think that was a smart move. On top of that, I want there to be constructed formats available. Now, obviously you could play block constructed, where the only cards that are legal are from these 3 sets. I think that would be great. I think it'd be a lot of fun to see. But I think it would be maybe even more fun for people to include the upcoming set, Foundations, where we kind of start fresh in creating a new standard. So, I haven't seen all the cards from Foundations yet, and when it comes to any set, whether it's my set or their set, I would be pretty liberal with doing restrictions and bannings. And yes, I would use restrictions if I thought they would work. To where you can only have 1 copy of the card, like Vintage. If the card is just really too powerful or creates a 2-card broken combo that's too easy to assemble too early in the game, then I might outright ban the card. Now, the only card I know I'm going to ban for certain is Omniscience, because it doesn't give a card in my first set room to breathe. Where that card is very similar to Omniscience, it costs a little bit less mana, but you have to exile the top 10 cards of your library to cast spells for free. I think it's a neat drawback, but if Omniscience is in the format, no one's going to bother trying to use that card. So that's why I would ban Omniscience. Other than that, I haven't seen anything from Foundations that I would need to ban yet. And as I said, I would not be shy about banning my own cards either, if they turn out to be too powerful. You know, some people, when they make a set of cards like this, you might say, well, why don't you just tweak the card? Why don't you just, give it a little tweak and a little change? And I don't so much enjoy that. That means if people have different printed versions of the card, they have to errata it. And I don't love that. I would be much more likely to restrict or ban a card, rather than trying to constantly update its rules text. I would only do erratas if the card is simply worded the wrong way to where it is not doing what it's supposed to do. My reasoning here is if you just build the set, it looks pretty. Well, arguably, I used AI-generated art. I don't love AI-generated art, but before you raise all of your hatred for AI-generated art, let me remind you that this is for free. Not charging any money for any of this. No money's changing hands. So say what you will about it, but it's not costing anyone anything. It's just being made available as a passion project. Anyway, as I was saying, cards on the screen look pretty, but they're not the same thing as having a card in your hand. I figure if I make a tournament, I give prize support, and I advertise it far enough in advance, people might show up. Now, I have some practical, logistical things that I have to figure out to do that. One is it can't be too far away from where I live. I do not have infinite money. It is not cheap and easy for me to fly somewhere and get a hotel room to set all this up. So it would ideally be not too far from where I live. I live in the region of northern central Kentucky. So, I could theoretically go as far as a big city like Louisville or Cincinnati, maybe. Or Lexington, Kentucky would be easier. But that's about as far as I can go. I only have so much money, as I said, and I also have physical limitations. I have pain and fatigue, and I take heart medication. There's only so much I can do as one person, in other words, to set this thing up. So I got finite money, I've got finite physical capabilities, but I've got a good head on my shoulders. I'm good at finding deals. I think the venue would need to be indoors. Even if you found an outdoor pavilion that was covered from the rain, wind is a big problem. Really big consideration that could ruin a paper Magic tournament. So unless someone comes up with a clever solution to wind in addition to rain, then I think it needs to be something that's indoors. And that's going to raise the price. It means at some point I've got to probably rent a space out. Now maybe there's a place that could be booked in advance that is a public free use space like a library. And if the tournament is not too large, maybe that would work. I don't know how many people would show up for the first one. I don't know how much I can advertise for it. The advertising mostly needs to happen for free as well. But surely to goodness, I could get someone to show up at a tournament where there was no entry fee and there was prize support. one would think. So my goal would be to make some number of these cards in some form of proxy available for the tournament for people to borrow. Another way that, I could give these cards away to people. For example, bartering is legal in the United States. It's not taxed. When you trade objects with people, as long as those objects are not like a land title, like a deed or the title of a car, transfers of those are taxed and there's like monetary implications. But if you're just bartering object for object, that is legal and as far as I know, would not be policeable in any way. So that's one thing. It could be kind of like a swap meet, and I could swap some of these proxy cards, playtest cards with people. Just try to make some available so the tournament runs a little bit more smoothly and people can turn them in afterwards, hopefully. And I'm putting a call out to the internet here to see if anyone's interested. If anyone likes the idea, is willing to help me set up, any of that, any support. I'm trying to put out feelers right now to see what, if anything, might exist in terms of interest for such an event. At the rate that I'm going, Growth of Veldmar is going to be published well in advance of this thing happening. I'm putting out like a couple or several cards a day. So this will probably be out before the end of the year, most likely, with all of its, art and card images that you could download and take to a fancy proxy website if you wanted to. So that'll be ready in time for people to be looking at for deck building or for studying the limited format. Now, I was thinking about introducing in future tournaments and other play some other formats that we could use to replace Magic as made by Hasbro. So, first of all, if you want to go back and play Hasbro Magic, those events will exist. So we don't need to actually replace any of those formats. Those formats will exist. They will be concurrent to whatever we're talking about here. So if you want to play regular Vintage or regular, like, Elder Dragon Highlander Commander, then you can go and do that. Those things will still be out there. But what about some alternatives? I was thinking we could make an alternative version of Vintage and Legacy and other formats for that matter, where basically the only cards that are allowed in are up to a certain date and do not include cards that never were legal in Standard. Now, when you go back to the really old formats, I think it's just best to include most of the stuff that was printed in the 1990s. What was legal in Standard back then was kind of a little bit more of an open thing at the time. Every weird little set that came down the pike was legal up to a point. Then they've started making blocks. Anyway, I think most of the old cards just kind of get grandfathered in. But then for newer things, we wouldn't have cards legal that were things like Commander products or, beatdown box sets or Modern Horizons or, any of these little extras. Anything that's a secret lair, anything that's Universes Beyond. So all of those sets that never came through Standard legality would not be included. So there'd be a version of Vintage, a version of Legacy, a version of Modern, where we strip those things out, version of Pioneer, and then Standard. Now, once we get to Standard's, rotating format, we have to pick a cutoff date for when we say, well, there's old Magic back there made by Hasbro. What are we going to have legal going forward? What is Standard going to look like as a format? So I think it would be best to start by having a 2-year standard. And 2-year standard would include Foundations. Now, Foundations would be kind of the ongoing core set. I have no real issues with it that I see so far. It looks fine. I'm not afraid of banning things if they need to. And on top of that, then you have about 2 blocks that are legal in the format at any given time. Right, so when the big fall expansion would hit, historically, that's when the oldest block would rotate out of Standard. And I think to start with, we just work from that model, except we stop using Hasbro cards, with the exception of Foundations. A good, clean, simple core set is a fine thing to include. Got no problems with it. I think it's a good way to keep like a core of Magic fundamentals into whatever weirdness transpires. And then we start having blocks, player-created blocks that progress from there as part of the Standard rotation. Now, I know I'm just one person. Taking on all of this by myself is probably a little mad, a little crazy. But I have produced 1 block of cards on my own. Obviously, it could use more playtesting. But I've followed most of the guardrails, that people like Mark Rosewater have suggested in trying to build the set in the first place. So, if anything, I think I've scaled back on the power level a little bit. There could be some outliers. Some of the individual cards I've printed, I might push a little bit to see if that card could be played in an older format. If it's something that could be a legacy player or a modern player or something like that. But for the most part, I think my power level is a little bit lower than what they've been printing into Standard here just recently. Not a great deal behind it, but a little bit. Just a little bit behind it. So, I think the Wastes of Veldmar, Defense of Veldmar, Growth of Veldmar, I think they're probably a little bit less strong than, say, Thunder Junction, Bloomburrow, Duskmourn. Maybe in terms of power, it's relatively close to Murders at Karlov Manor. That one felt a little bit weaker. I still wonder if Murders at Karlov Manor might be a little bit stronger than what I've made here, but I think it's okay to step back just a little bit on the power curve, the power creep. But it's still not far behind what you'd expect from most modern sets. Going forward, I would love to continue making more Magic sets. I've made a couple of 4-color factions here without overwhelming the sets. I think it would be fun to gradually visit the other 4-color factions through future blocks. That might take a couple of years to actually play out over the course of 2 more blocks before we could meet possibly all 5 factions that are 4-color. But I would relish the chance to do that. I also would not mind pulling other people in to where I'm collaborating with someone else, designing these sets, playtesting the sets, Or, if someone else has a set that's mostly finished, I could help them polish it up, put it into the rotation. I'm open to ideas. But in terms of what I can offer and what I have to give as an individual, this is the gift that I would like to give to the Magic community. I would like to give Magic a way forward that doesn't include Hasbro. Because I think Hasbro is making terrible mistakes. They may not necessarily kill Magic, at least not immediately, but I do not like the direction it's going. So, let me know what you think. These are just some ideas, some passions of mine, things that I want to bring to fruition. And just as something a little bit quirky to leave off on here, you'll see that I have Tezzeret as a card that I made for the set. His body got replaced with a dark steel body. Spoilers. You could read the story A Man of Parts if you haven't seen what happens with Tezzeret in Phyrexia. But now I thought I could represent that by making dark steel tokens, which then he could turn into 5/5s that would be indestructible. So I thought that's kind of cute. Also, for some reason, the art they had for Tezzeret in the, thing about the space set that's coming up next year, for some reason they had him with his old, oversized, weird-looking arm made out of Ethereum. In the short story A Man of Parts, his Ethereum got melted down by Jin Gitaxias to be repurposed and poured into his spine to bind with the dark steel in his body. I don't see any reason why he would still have that, mismatched, asymmetrical arm when his body had been replaced with dark steel by Jin Gitaxias. I don't think he would make something asymmetrical like that. All right, here's another piece of Tezzeret art. I think that Jin Gitaxias would make a symmetrical body out of dark steel. I don't think that they would have kept that asymmetry with the Ethereum arm that he had before. So that art that they had on the space set didn't feel authentic to me. It actually rang hollow. And I think that Tezzeret would look something more approximating this. If you're wondering about the strings of gold, that's an old thing about dark steel. It has these sort of orbiting halos of thin gold thread that go around them. So I'm trying to keep that as a visual in the art with his dark steel body. Anyway, that's enough for now. Hey, I hope you found something interesting that I had to say. If you disagree or you hate what I have to say, well, sound off in the comments on that too. Basically, I want to know what your thoughts are on how we move forward without Hasbro in the mix. So, I will continue to cover Magic, and I will continue to play Arena because Arena is free. Until next time, never stop honing your critical thinking and empathy.